Women are better at saving. Hear that, lady? Women are
Absolutely.
better at saving and women are better at investing. Hi, I'm Dr. Lori Stevick Rust. 40 years of sitting with people through their hardest moments has taught me one thing. Our power lives in our courage to be real. This is where we stop pretending and we find our way back to ourselves. I'm glad you're here. Now pull up a chair. This is Becoming Real. Money, those dirty little pieces of paper, is never really just about money. Nearly 1 in 4 people report having ended a relationship because of financial incompatibility, and more than 2 in 5 adults say money negatively affects their mental health. So, no, this is not just about dollars and cents. Money gets tied to power, security, freedom, self worth, shame, control, how we spend our time, our legacy, and that awful feeling that can sit at the core of us, feeling like we are just not far enough along financially. We fight about it, we avoid it, we lose sleep over it, and sometimes we even spend money because we're stressed about spending money. I know, I see you. So today, we're having a real conversation about the biggest money mistakes people make, what to focus on in our 20s, 30s, 40s, and beyond. What happens when we do have that feeling of falling behind? What are the practical steps that we can do to help get us caught up? Let's be honest, this adulting thing is expensive, and we have questions. Let's get some answers. Our guest today is Christine Wiskochil. She is vice president at Baird in Cleveland, Ohio, and she's exactly the kind of financial expert I wanted in this conversation. With over 30 years in financial services, with a team that has served clients for over 60 years, she brings the real world experience to answer the questions most of us have either been too afraid or too embarrassed or simply just unaware of what we should even be asking. We have questions and she has answers. Let's jump into talking about money and the mistakes we make, the conversations we're avoiding, and a few surprisingly simple actions we can take that can actually change our financial future. Let's get into it. Okay, my friend, we are here and we have a lot of questions and we need some answers. I hear from a lot of my clients and my adult children as well. Adulting is hard, but adulting is also very expensive. How do we fix that? How do we manage our money better? I know as a psychologist, we carry all kinds of biases and gendered messages that are passed down from generations. And some of them are really pretty accurate sometimes, and some are so
hmm
far off the mark.
Or
And
they
one of
feel
them,
accurate, right? They
right,
feel
right.
accurate.
That is true. That is true. And this one, I think we've often heard things as women. Well, asking for raises is not really very polite. Talking about money isn't polite. If a woman makes more money than a man, you shouldn't be sharing that information. So, all of that, but also down to, well, men are just better with money. And when you sent me some information, which I am going to share with our listeners, and all the links for all the information will be in the show notes for people to grab at the end. But you gave me some information that actually says women are better at saving. Hear that, lady? Women are
Absolutely.
better at saving and women are better at investing. Like our portfolios tend to do a little bit better. So, this is where we're going to start our conversation.
So it's interesting you say that because I agree. Part of why I got into this business and why I was passionate about it is because I was the one of the women sitting next to my husband at the time or sitting next to a business partner and kept finding the advisor looking at the husband and not looking at me. And I see it in client meetings all the time, which is why my team brought me on board because we are better listeners, which makes us better investors, honestly, because we're willing to accept when we, let's say, make a mistake. Maybe we put our money into something that doesn't do as well. Our portfolios historically, which the statistics are in the information I gave you, earn close to 1 and 2% more. And why I think that is we're more patient with when we're putting the money away to watch it grow and not necessarily panic. And I will say, personally, my male clients, you can get online to look at your investments daily, which you and I have talked about this. Some people shove it in the drawer and wait for their annual meeting.
I'm a drawer shover.
Yep. Men will get on almost every day. Men will be more tendent to look at that day-to-day data and want to like try to get, I won't say a quick fix, but
Mhm.
let's say, okay, let's get into the market or let's sell this or sell that. We are not. We are patient. We also are better savers. And I think it's because as a woman, naturally, like talking about how as females we always are running the household. We carry the purses per se, but we really do because we have to make it all work. We
Mhm.
have to make sure we've got enough in the kitty for the groceries, our kids' soccer shoes. So because of that, because of we've had that on our shoulders, we're better savers because we've had to budget and figure that out. And as women that we live longer, obviously about 5.5, 6 years longer. Every statistic's slightly different on that. But so we have to be better savers. So it puts that, I wouldn't say pressure, but
Mhm.
we know that because we're most likely, let's say over the age of 70, almost 40 to 50% of women are widowed at that time. So
Mhm.
when we are saving, we know we need to have either set aside a little more or also be a little patient because we know we're going to have that time in our life where we are going to be on our own. So part of the problem is it starts young when we're told these things.
Mhm.
For me and my family, my mom was the one that managed all the bills. My dad is the big spender. So maybe that helped me be more helpful with my clients because I saw a reverse role where my mom was the one managing everything. She was the one that had to like tighten the purse straps, right? And say, no, we're not buying this. We're not doing this vacation. We've got A, B, and C. Where, like I said, the listening is a big thing and the patience and not putting as much emotion into it because investing is so emotional. We watch the news, we watch, everything we're seeing day to day. We are better as women to see the big picture. And we do that in our families day to day. You talk about your daughters and, your one daughter has her own business. So she's seeing day to day what she has to do to keep that business going. So I think it starts young and we can change that. You and I can change that. Our listeners can change that.
Right.
So having good people around you that know that that's a myth.
Mhm. I
I
love
think it's
that.
a myth.
I love it. Well, you're giving us the data to prove what's the myth. So
Oh,
so many
yeah,
things there, and I have a couple of questions all embedded in what you've just given us. And the
absolutely.
first thing is, I think until we can right size gender equity in all places, like
Mhm,
particularly in the wage gap. So I think
mhm,
about what you just shared, which is we live longer, we're managing household budgets typically, maybe
mhm,
starting and running our own businesses. But if
mhm.
the wage gap is something we're still trying to overcome, it almost to me feels like women have to especially do better to make up that difference. I wish it wasn't the case. And I think that's a whole nother topic for us to address. But
Mhm,
for those people who are listening today, um, and I know as we've talked about, I have two adult daughters. I have one that's 30,
mhm.
one that's 33. And for them, and many of my clients, there's that feeling like, okay, but I don't even know, like, what do I do? What do I do in my 20s? What should I be focusing on? If I don't even really have any money left, I'm going paycheck to paycheck. How do I put money aside? How can I even feel like I have the luxury of investing? So, what would you be saying if you're speaking directly, maybe to our 20s and our 30-year-olds in those gaps? What should people, particularly women, be focused on?
So I think in our 20s and 30s, I look at myself, I wasn't a traditional college student. I worked and paid for my college. As I went along, I was blessed to get an opportunity at UPS. So that helped teach me a lot of things in my 20s. But I would say that starting young with the saving, even if it's a little bit, we suggest automating that. So what I mean is if you start a new job or you're getting a new job, one thing off the bat is when you are at that 20 and 30 range and you already know, I think historically or statistically, it's about 20 cents less on the dollar. So we're already stepping into a role, and I see it myself. And you and I have talked personally about my partnership. I'm the only female wealth manager in my office. I've been the only sole woman in this role in all three firms that I've been at in my career. So it empowered me to make sure that women know how successful they can be and our negotiating skills. So right off the bat, knowing that when you do get out of your 20s and you're working on paying off that debt is really important, but knowing the numbers behind your debt. So it's not just, I want to check off that box and pay off my student loan. Obviously, now interest rates are a little higher. We're in the 5 to 6 range. Student loans used to be closer to 3 and 4%. Inflation's at 3%. So you have to look at, if you are investing, knowing starting young in your 20s, if you can put away as simple as $50 to $75, which we spend that anymore going through which we should be eating fast food, but going through a fast food drive through and getting lunch or getting coffees for the week, how quickly, and I'll share and send you that information if anyone would want it, how quickly that $50 to $100 a month will grow starting in your 20s.
Mhm.
So knowing what's in your budget, having a budget, which I also have that information, a budget checklist of what are you spending it on, start saving young. And it doesn't have to be a lot. For myself, and I'm sure you were too, putting your way through school, I was like trying to pay my car payment, trying to pay my insurance, pay my bills. But I probably could have came up with $25, $50 that I was spending elsewhere, and put that away. And then the compounding interest that's in our favor. So
Mhm.
we think all the time about credit card debt. I just was listening this morning, the average credit card debt is 23% right now. So that's hard, right? And also Americans right now with gas prices and the cost of things, with 40%, it's I forget how many million of Americans are using their credit cards to pay for day-to-day expenses. So I just bring that up because that philosophy when you start younger of, if you do get a credit card, using it, paying it off, because your credit score is important in your 20s. So that's one other thing, really knowing your credit score, what goes into your credit score. That's what's going to give you, I say, buying power as you get older for a home, for a car. It helps your interest rate, which then that just kind of helps all of your debt. But starting early saving, even if it's a little bit and it feels silly, it's a little bit, you would be amazed at what $50 in your 20s will look like, even in your 40s or 50s.
Yeah, I love all of that because I think you've hit the nail, I think, that I hear from many people, which is I don't have excess. And again, I don't want this to be heard like I recognize there are people literally making decisions between groceries and medications because we're in a really hard time.
Absolutely.
So I'm not
100%.
dismissing that, but I'm acknowledging that there is, in addition to that, places where we think, so I spent the extra $20, or I just, bought something over here on Amazon because we know how quick and easy that is. The power when you see the numbers of compounding interest over a couple decades, like that $50 is not going to make or break most people today. But when you look at if it's put away, what that can do for you is so powerful. And I think that's something that's worth underscoring here because
Yeah.
I don't think we think about money in that way. We think about it more in the day to day. Now, I want to piggyback on that by asking you because I know you're a financial advisor, and I'll say, even for myself, having a financial advisor was just never on the radar. I worked for the government. I had a 401k. I had another W-2 job at a hospital. I had a 401k. It was only at some point along the way that I thought, wait a minute, I I'm turning my 401k over to these companies to let them invest it. And I certainly knew that I didn't want to learn or be managing my own portfolios. But I always thought that seeking out financial advisors and having somebody invest for me meant you had to be wealthy. And I kept thinking, well, I don't have money to pay for a financial advisor. And if it's already being done for me, kind of out of sight, out of mind, it was only when I really started to take a deep dive and quite honestly met you at a financial women's event that I thought, maybe I need to really look at what we're doing. And it was probably, and I say this not because you're on here, if I was talking to anybody else, the best decision that my husband and I ever made for two reasons. One, I think we have seen more growth and our long-term life goals, I know, are being managed. So it's not just about make money for us. It's about
Mhm.
at this stage in our life, this is what is our priority. Build that into a budget for us to make sure that we can achieve those goals. And we didn't have to have money. Like we didn't have to have big amounts to be investing and things like that. So can you speak to that? Because again, I know there might be younger people or people who are thinking, that sounds like a luxury. Like, I'm clicking off here. I don't need a financial advisor because I don't even have money to be advising myself on. So, speak to that for a little bit.
I will. And first off, thank you so much for trusting me with your family. That is the biggest compliment ever as someone in my business. And I say that because, I have worked with every client. When I started growing my business, I was working with younger professionals. I worked prior to doing this. I worked in companies. So I was sitting across employees like who will probably be on this podcast that are trying to figure out how to invest their 401k. But a team and I look at myself and my team as an advisor, they should be having capacity to take on. So I'm just going to use you as an example. Your daughters, Katie and Sarah, that they are at a stage in their life where they need that help. So we bring on as a team. We have two younger advisors. I take them on too because they're my clients, children and family. But and Baird works with them to make sure that it doesn't matter the dollar amount. Now, again, to buy some certain types of investments, you have to have a certain dollar amount.
Mhm. Mhm.
But the planning and in doing that, that is a myth that you have to have $1 million in the bank or whatever it is. I will say truthfully, there are advisors out there that won't open the door under a certain dollar amount. But there are many like myself and my team. I'm blessed to have three other advisors on my team and two younger advisors coming through the ranks that are in their late 20s that have helped us with that gap for our families that have younger investors. And it is so important because with the baby boomers retiring, it's important for my job security, my clients' financial security to know that when something happens to me, my clients' children have someone to work with. So that kind of adds a little more into that discussion. But absolutely, that's not true. And I think with the budgeting and going through a budget, and everyone thinks, let's do a financial plan, and they wait to do it till they're in their 50s.
Mhm.
When you're setting your goals, whatever your goal may be, and that at that younger age, 20s, 30s, I want to buy a home, or maybe I want to go back and get my master's. So those goals change, and knowing what those are and
Mhm.
speaking to the family aspect of it as a younger investor is everyone's retirement looks different. That's the other thing I've discovered when investors have multiple businesses they worked for because
Mhm.
they leave behind an old investment.
Yeah.
So it's really empowering when you sit down with someone when they say to you, I don't really think I have enough. And I'm like, well, tell me a little bit about your story, your career, where you've been. We start unraveling things and discovering things. And it is such a good feeling for me and for the client that they're able to see what they've accumulated. Because when you work with an advisor, even if the investments are all in one place, the
Mhm.
planning aspect shows you what you have, maybe at your current job where your savings, or maybe where your debt's at. And as an advisor, it's my job to say, oh, you have a loan on your car at this rate. Well, let's look at that. What does that look like? Does it make sense to pay that off? Well, your loan on that car and what we're earning in the market, let's just pay a little extra on it. So that's where the advisor comes in, and the financial planning starting younger than later gives you the projection that you want to know what you want in retirement. It's all about the relationship with that family
Yeah.
and their children and empowering them to know this is what it looks like, whether you're traveling the world in retirement or you're traveling in a camper like my husband and I are going to do in retirement.
Yeah.
Everyone's, life looks different. And that's our role as an advisor. And when you're asking questions or interviewing advisor, look at that team of advisors. Do they have backup plans? Do they have someone that when they retire, that someone's going to be able to invest your money and you're not going to be back to square one shopping around again?
Yeah. Well, two important pieces out of that for me that I wanted to react to is
Hmm.
thinking about financial planners being strategists. Like for me, it was we had stuff in a lot of places. And so it was sort of like, okay, we're going to keep this envelope, we're going to keep this file. Once you leave this job, the strategy was let's look at it collectively and then make sure that investments and risk and conservative processes as we started to age was all being managed around our personal strategy that you were helping us execute. And I laugh, when you say, kind of putting it all together. the family joke in our house is, where parents will say, if God forbid something happens to us, here's our will. I always say to my kids, if God forbid something happens, Dad and I together, you call Christine because she knows where all the money is. She knows how to access
And
it.
your
Um,
attorney, and
uh,
they finally know who was who, because for a
Well,
while it
yeah,
was
yeah. Well, they used to laugh because they'd be like, "Okay, but is there a lawyer?" And I'd say, "Yes, there's a lawyer." And then they always had your names inverted. So I'll say, either call Pat or Christine. Somebody knows exactly what to do in the event of some tragedy for
And
us.
can I add to that? Because I
Sure.
think that's something else that people do not realize that, and I'm a good financial planner or a good advisor, they build relationships with all of those people that are important to you, you and your husband and your family. So having a relationship, and I think you and I have worked together with you having your own business on finding the right CPA or accountant, that attorney. So all three of us know each other. You
Uh-huh.
have a team. It's your, I say, kind of like your board, right? It's your board for your family. And all of us work together to do what's best for that client. And that's important.
Well, and, anybody who knows me knows that whether I'm working with caregivers or clients, I always believe in a team and I also think that's kind of, now I'm going to own a bias too here, that women we seek out a team. Like we want a collective group. I don't want just one.
Hmm.
I want a lot of voices managing issues for me and for my family. So I think that's where can sometimes come into play too. I want somebody who's going to listen. I want an attorney who's listening. I want a financial planner who's listening. I want a CPA who's listening. I want people who are paying attention to this is what matters to us. You give me your professional guidance, but I want it to fit into what matters to us. And so I think that's really important too.
And it's interesting you say that because I'll just myself personally, I was on my own in the beginning of the business and it's very overwhelming. Like anything, like yourself included, you cannot know everything.
Right.
It's too
Right.
much information. My partner Jerry and I do a lot of joint work together, and my other partner manages the investments. And I know what I'm good at. So we all have different things. I went from myself to a team of 9. Now, down the road, my clients, they work with me,
Right.
it's one on one, and that's usually how it works. But there are things that come up for yourself as a business owner that I may reach out to my partner that knows that aspect of things better. So I completely agree with the team aspect in this.
Right. All right. So let's pivot for a minute. What about for our listeners who are bubbling? Let's say, like in their 40s, they're solid in a career, perhaps, or in their business that they've started and now is beginning to really get solidified, and then bubbling into their 50s and thinking, I am not even close to what I need or want for retirement because I didn't do the things I should have done in my 20s and 30s. I know that it's never too late for anything, but let me ask
Hmm.
you, as a financial person, what do we need to do to play catch up to make
Hmm.
are preparing for retirement if we didn't do all these things that you're saying we should have been doing in our 20s
So
and
so it's interesting you say catch up because at age 50, you're able to do what's called catch up contributions.
oh,
So when you're working and you have a retirement plan, first and foremost, you really should have a financial plan in your place. If you don't, you should work on that. And with that plan, you will see what are all the benefits of my current 401k plan, making sure you're putting in enough to get that full match. That's free money that people sometimes don't realize. They're like, this is what I can afford. So getting that free match and knowing what type of plan, especially for business owners, there's multiple types of plans that you can utilize, whether it's a SEP IRA, a self-employed IRA, or a simple, where you can put a little bit more money away than in a traditional IRA. So if you're working for a company, make sure you're putting in enough to get that free match. And if you are on a 401k, what's nice is if you're not at a point where you want to work with an advisor, 99% of the companies, whether it's a principal or an American fund, they have online access to do, you can do your planning yourself. So
oh,
you can put in what you have in investments, you can put in your loan, if you have a home, your debt, all your expenses. It spits out a grade, kind of like our planning does at Baird, and everyone aims for that. You can never get higher than a 99%. And that's because the world, as you know, nothing's perfect. There's always going to be the 1% that it's not
right,
going to work
right.
out, right?
Yeah.
But it'll give you a grade on where are you at or what can you do to catch up. So there are avenues within the retirement plans, IRAs, 401ks, that you can do catch up. And then also, like I said, looking at your debt. Where
Yeah.
are you at on your mortgage? I mean, there are avenues, reverse mortgages, those are kind of risky, but there are avenues where you can look at whether it's consolidating debt to get things taken care of by retirement, but also just looking at what you have currently. And I always go back to that plan. And again, you're right, it's never too late, but it is interesting when you look at the numbers. If you start saving in your 40s and 50s, how much more you have to put in because of the compounding interest.
Right. And 20s and 30-year-olds, compounding interest, it is your friend. I'm hoping that they are hearing the
Yeah.
value of not having to do the catch up if they take it serious enough to go, this compounding interest is your friend. This is so powerful. So I just want to take one more opportunity to say that again.
Yeah.
So now, with all of that, let me ask this. We all make a lot of financial mistakes. As an advisor, what would you say are maybe the top three biggest mistakes that we should all be paying
Mhm.
attention to, that we should be sidestepping?
That what you said earlier was interesting, that it's too late. I'm starting too late. There's no hope for me. That is not true. That's a mistake. Um, Another mistake is saying, I'm going to put it in next month, or I'm going to save, I'm going to look at the end of the year, put money in monthly. The dollar cost averaging, meaning you're putting money into your investments on a monthly basis, that also, along with, as a woman, you're going to do better in the market. But that also makes your investments um, perform better because you're thinking about you're buying it at different times. Stake wise, too, is like I've made the mistakes too. I've maybe my buckets of needs, wishes, and wants, really separating those three things. We have to have more confidence in ourselves. Like I feel that I naturally gravitate to clients and to people in my life that help that confidence. And
Mhm.
again, I personally, I struggled with that for years because I was the only woman in the room. These guys are driving fancy cars, cufflinks. I mean, I had a meeting today and I'm at the Union Club, and I was telling you that women weren't even allowed. We had a separate entrance at this club in the 80s. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. And I come here, but I come here and I utilize this club because I'm like, it's my right to utilize this club. I've
Yeah.
earned this.
Yeah.
And again, it's just one of those things of having more confidence in ourselves.
And this is where I think we veer into the whole thing about the psychology of money. Certainly, in my job as a psychologist, money is a big source of fighting in
Mhm.
relationships. It's a huge issue around confidence and capacity. Like if I have less than, or I'm not making the same as,
Mhm.
that dollar amount translates into self worth and self esteem. Confidence also comes out in, can I stand up and just say, I want to make more money? This gets down to like women, and I've heard you say this before too, in asking for more money, asking for the raise, not thinking, well, I'm sure they see my value and my worth. And, eventually they'll do the right thing, as opposed to, it's okay to say, no, this is my value. This is what
Mhm.
I expect. This is what I want. Because oftentimes men are not uncomfortable asking for that. Women will wait and wait until they think it's really perfect. I've done all of the right things. And then maybe I could dip my toe into saying, I'd like a little more. So I think that because money and power get tied together too. And that's why relationships can often struggle, because it's about, if you make more, do I feel inadequate? If you're spending more, does that make me feel insecure? It gets tied to
Mhm.
so many issues. Sometimes I think we think about money as it's just our means to get to buy things that we will enjoy. But money, and I know this from working with many, many women who have been in abusive relationships, staying in relationships because they can't afford to get a divorce, that money is about our opportunity and our ticket for whatever else we want. Maybe we want more of our time back. Maybe we want healthier relationships. Maybe we want the freedom of safety, the security, all that comes
Oh,
along.
but
Mhm.
knowing right away when you get into that relationship, asking those questions about the financial things that It's been, a handful of times where I've had women that when their husband passes that don't even know the passwords to get on and
Mhm.
know what they have. So I think that we need to be better educating women at a younger age, or these are the things that are so important.
I love that part because it's also where I can see some of my own clients when they're struggling with something to say, but we really can't afford to do that. And I would love to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And then it's like, have you checked with your financial person? Because sometimes I think what we see through a lens is, you know, there's a dollar amount in this account, there's a dollar amount in this account. But with an advisor, what I think, at least for me, was surprising to be able to say to the advisor, I would like to be able to pull out X amount in the next 4 years and use it for this thing. How do I get that
Mm.
accomplished? It's not like,
Mhm.
do I have that? It's how can you, Christine, make that happen for me?
Sure.
Whether
Yeah.
that means you're moving my money around, is whether that means you're investing over here. I'm telling you what I want, and you're then serving my need by figuring out what to do with my money.
And I think that's a really important thing to talk about because we look at when we're getting in retirement and what we've saved. And we've always had, I call it the backup plan with Social Security, because many of us know the deficit that's in that Social Security bucket per se now of that worry of, and again, it even goes back to when we're talking about women wanting that confidence or staying in a relationship longer than they should, is getting that financial independence early and knowing anything extra that comes along. And again, I'm not saying Social Security is going away. That's not what I'm saying, but
Right, right.
anything that you can do to empower yourself to have that independence is
Yeah.
so important. What does it look like? Am I going to be able to take that out? What I need in retirement and income?
Wow, that's great. I recognize the question that is really it's personal. We can't give a this fits everybody's process, but I have my own bias, and I'm going to ask you about your perspective. Should a couple that's getting either young, getting into a relationship or into a second relationship, second marriage, what do you think about individual accounts versus joint accounts? Where do you, as an advisor, fall in that question?
What I found is some clients will have a joint account and they'll utilize that for whether it's house, if you own a home together, updates in the home, vacations. But I think it's also important for everyone, man and woman, to have their own money or their own identity with their own money. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'd say probably out of all my clients, I'd say almost 70 to 80% of my clients each have their own accounts.
Mhm.
And I bring that up because you as an investor may be a little more aggressive and you may want to buy one of those stocks like a Nvidia or tech stock or all this AI stuff going on. And your partner may be a little more conservative.
Mhm.
So it's nice, and I have clients that they'll call in and they'll ask for a certain investment, and so I have both. Where it's important to know, this is like a little bit of a housekeeping, when you have individual accounts, make sure they're a TOD account, transfer on death, and I bring that up because if it's just in your name solely, if something happens to you, it has to go through probate.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good to hear, like, all of the added pieces of investment. Like, you might each of you might have a very different tolerance or comfort with investing, and loss.
And
But
one
I'll
may be a bigger spender. So
yeah.
I think, and I'll completely share with my parents because I watched so many fights over the years. My
Mhm,
dad being a much more of a spender than my mom, and he's more like just reactive to things, and my mom is not.
mhm.
So they always had their own accounts because my
Yeah.
mom on the side, she worked full time, but she cleaned houses. And so when she cleaned those houses, that extra money, she used it, honestly, she used it on us girls.
Yeah, and I think, certainly as a psychologist, I know that for all of the reasons that I think empowerment, both for women and for men, is money is tied. It's got those tentacles, those deep roots tied to so many other issues that I think when we are completely wedded to one another around finance, it's risky. Even in the
Mhm.
best of marriages, I think it's risky. It sets you up for, I just noticed you took this out of the account. Why are you doing this? I thought this was our goal. When you have no freedom of your own
Mhm.
independence, both the consequences of overspending and the benefit of saying, this is my sense of control. This is not about you, honey, but this is about what I need for me. I think there's great value. And particularly for women, I'm a big proponent of you need to make sure that you are taking care of yourself, making sure that you understand your finances, where the money is, and having some say and some control over that. Because I think we've worked way too hard as women, way, way, way too hard as women to ever go back.
I think I look at back at I'll just share my mom, like, well, my grandma she was amazing. My grandma was widowed young, and my grandpa had a gas station in a small little town. And so, when he passed away, my grandma, which was unheard of, took over this gas station in Little Signet, Ohio, and she had to raise 3 children on her own, and so that seeing her do that or hearing those stories, instilled some things, I think, in me that if she can manage and do that was a huge inspiration for me, and I share that story anytime because that was a time when, women were not respected in that role. Women did not own businesses. Women were stay-at-home moms, and I think when we look at women knowing now that women are better savers, but the fact that we step in and out of jobs or careers because we are taking care of our kids. You and I are in that age where my parents are in their early 80s. So I'm stepping in a lot more with my mom and dad. We're in
Mhm.
this wedge, and you know this so well, that we're trying to take care of both things. And we sometimes don't take care of ourselves. So in that money that is like your own money, investing in your health is huge.
Yeah, no question. And I think, we have worked way, way, way too hard as women to fight for the rights that I worry get stripped away if we don't have our own money or control over
Mhm.
our money. And I know that sounds not so sexy. When you look at the statistics about relationships and money, money is the surface issue. But I always believe, again, it's the tentacles that fall deep, deep roots from money, which is I'm the one who making the money, so I get to make these decisions. I'm in control is the other
Mhm.
method. You are less than. What do? You don't do anything around here. It gets tied to all of, or if it wasn't for your overexpending so much money, we would be able to do X, Y, or Z. So it becomes the blame game. So all of these issues are the roots that kind of trickle up to
You
money.
are right, you're right, I've seen that too, and, like, then some explosion will happen in a meeting, and I'm like, "Oh, this can't be just about this, there's something else going on behind the
Right.
scenes."
Well, I'm going to have to end it there. Let me say, this has been, like, so much. It's a lot of information, and you've done a great job in kind of bringing it down for us in buckets that I think based on where we are in life and what we need to be doing
Mhm.
to be thinking about money. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you think, "Gosh, this is always the burning questions that your clients just never ask, but they should be asking you." Is there anything off the top of your head you can think of?
Well, I also say too that, with clients that they're always like, "Oh, I don't understand this. This is a dumb question." I'm gonna tell you, when I started this, I didn't understand any of this either.
Yeah.
That's why you work you work with people that help, and that when you ask a question that you may think is something that, "Oh, they already know this," we learn as advisors. So, it sounds silly, but no question is a dumb question because
Wow.
everyone learns when a question is brought up.
Yeah, well, money, and I'm going to say, money might be filthy. See, I'm back to the visual of it. Money might be
It
filthy.
is.
It's filthy and it's dirty, but it doesn't have to be a dirty word. It's an okay topic for us to be talking about without all of those layers of shame and guilt and doubt. Money is money, and it's an
It gives
important
you
component.
choices in life that when you wake up on a Saturday and you're retired and you wanna take your grandkids to Cedar Point or that park, you've worked hard, you've saved, no matter whatever that dollar amount looks like, you're at a point where you have the freedom to get up and do what you want with your family. That's what it's about.
Agreed. Well, we'll end it on that. Thank you so
Thank you.
very much, my friend. This was wonderful. Lots of good information. I know that many people are going to benefit.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for spending your time with us today. Before you go, if this episode touched something real in you, please consider sharing it with someone who may need that too. If you'd like to stay connected beyond the podcast, sign up for my email list at drloristevick.com. That's where I share more reflections, resources, and an invitation to join the real conversation, which is my free live monthly gathering for women who want deeper conversations beyond the podcast. Until next time, be brave enough to be real.